EDCI 706, Reform and Change Candidates. Dr. Palermo with your week 3 instructional video, all about implementing change and implementing IC, innovation configuration maps this week. In Hall and Horde, you're reading chapter 3, and it is about how we can clarify the change, innovation configurations. I think I called it an implementation configuration. IC maps. So the notion that a construct of how to change, it's a map, the idea that a map helps you get there, that many of us think and work in word pictures, that if you're going to lead a change in a school, mapping it out for folks, making each step clear and drawing folks a picture helps. So in chapter 3, you see innovation configuration maps on page 64 for teaching and learning of mathematics in Germany. On page 66, an innovation configuration map that's a crosswalk of 4 role groups in learning forwards standards for professional learning. Lots of different maps to line out and be clear about each step of a change process. Because change is a process, and change, as I'll point out to you in a minute, doesn't happen if we don't lead it and monitor it and check and support it. So that's the big idea in Hall and Horde chapter 3, and that's continued here in a couple of the other items in the week 3 content. Take a look at this innovation configuration map handout, for example. I created this, so it's really simple, and that's not going to work there. Let me see. Hold on, hold the phone here. Close, stop that share. I apologize. Bear with me. Okay, if you're back with me, this is that example, that document that you can see in the Blackboard page. Big points here this week. Change doesn't just happen, it has to be led. Change is a series of events or interventions. For change to be successful, it should be planned, taught. You have to teach the change, checked and supported. And the big idea here is that the more complex the change, the richer the IC map should be. So I'm giving you an example of a very simple map that I actually use to roll out the idea of walkthroughs, but some of the other examples are page long, 20 pages, 100 pages. Some IC maps, innovation configuration maps, as you'll see with the Kentucky Standards one, can be very complex. But walk through this with me now. I wanted to create a new walkthrough instrument in a school that was going to measure the Marzano 9, that was going to look for those research-based strategies. So first I had to introduce the concept to the staff. I was developing a vision of the intended change. I had to provide copies of the information, the resources, so that folks knew what these strategies were. I had to train the staff in the walkthrough process. That was professional learning. I had to train the assessors. Then it created a schedule of the walkthroughs, began the walkthroughs, gathered data, compiled and analyzed the data, presented the data to the staff, and began conversation about the practices. This was a year-long implementation, okay? And then we repeated the last several steps and did several different walkthroughs during the course of the year. I had to then map out who was going to be responsible for providing the interventions, what are the desired outcomes at each step, and how we were going to measure that and see if it happened. So that's my very simple example of an innovation configuration map. Let me show you a more complex one. Okay, so I stopped sharing that screen. Let's see if we can go back. I hope I can. Lots of technology issues on this end this week, I'm sorry. The sample IC map is here. It is from the state of Kentucky. It is for rolling out Common Core standards, implementing this change. You can imagine that statewide this is a huge change. So there's a huge document here that breaks down and lays out and step by step how they wanted to roll out Common Core in Kentucky. I forget how many pages it runs here, but it's very long, 7 of 27. It's a long plan, and so an innovation configuration map can be a very detailed process. Okay, let me see if I can get it back here. Okay, now we're back. So your dialogue post this week, one of your discussion boards is about this chapter. As a teacher leader, what key steps would you take to introduce the idea of an innovation configuration map to a district staff or leader? Check out chapter 3. It'll give you some ideas, but can you use an IC map to implement a change at your school? And what ideas do you have about rolling it out, and to whom might you present something like this? Okay. Your other post this week is about the PEC. You should be in the process of collecting data for your PEC. How's that going? What snags are you running into? What's happening that you didn't think would happen that wasn't maybe part of your plan in the PEB? Things change, and I know that PECs don't always wind up the way they started. Another piece of your reading this week is the PLC book. You should be finished with chapter or section 2, the chapters on trust and building teams. There are some excellent tools in here again. Trust on Our Team survey on page 63. You can and use that as an assessment tool if you need to, if trust is one of the issues at your place. And you should be thinking about your PLCPA and getting started on that. When we meet again in just 2 weeks, I want you to have a draft PLCPA to share with your colleagues. So get going on that. I'm hoping that we're also going to line up Bill Ferreter to spend some time with us. So start thinking deeply about PLCs at your building, at your site, and how they have rolled out, or what the current state of PLCs is now. And how do you know? Have you used an assessment tool? Have you used a survey? Is there something from the TWC perhaps that is telling you about the PLC needs at your school? Okay, read chapter 3, Hall and Horde, respond about IC maps, respond about your PEC, please. I deleted or closed a post related to the Leading in a Culture of Change. You should be reading that, reading Leading in a Culture of Change now. And in 2 weeks, again, when we are back together again in Goldsboro, we're going to do some activities around that Fulham Leading in a Culture of Change. So it's a light read. Skim it if you must, but make sure you've read it before we meet again in 2 weeks. I think that's plenty for this week. Get started for sure on your PLCPA, and I hope things are going well on your PE as well. Thank you, folks. See you next week.